to the step, filming, and just boiling. I mean, beautiful step out there, but very, very hot. And then when I went to Irkutsk when I was 19, the ice on Lake Baikal was 3 meters thick, and I was walking along on the lake on the thing, and lorries were driving past me like it was the MCAT, and then the wind started up. And sometimes when the wind blows in your face, you cry some tears. It makes your eyes water. Well, as soon as the wind blew, my tears froze and my eyes froze shut. And I couldn't see anything, so I had to stand like this, wait for it to melt. And I thought, this is definitely the real winter, when your eyes freeze shut. So I had to wear ski goggles for the rest of the day. It was an amazing experience to see the proper Siberian winter like that. Yes, and just a note now is that this is the warmest winter. Well, it started snowing today, but for ever recorded. And I just wonder, I do ask Russians often whether maybe the Russian winters are getting easier and easier especially in Moscow each year. I don't know whether they are or not, but it's interesting that the Russians say, you can almost hear maybe they're a bit sad that they're losing some of the fierce cold winters that they have. Some say, oh, I won't miss it, I'm fed up with cold weather. But some of them, maybe the Russians I've asked, say, yeah, we might never see a big heavy winter here again. I don't know, maybe we will, maybe we won't. But interesting, global warming. Now on to something. Just briefly, I think that I find it fascinating. I think a lot of other people find fascinating when you're talking about going to different countries, which is cultural differences and strange cultural things that pass between the two. I'll start off with English impressions of Russia. It's funny. It's funny to go back home and talk about Russia. I've mentioned the cold. I don't know if any of you have seen a cartoon called Family Guy. There's a clip there that's very famous in Russia now. It's when all the main characters go to meet Vladimir Putin. They're on a quest. So yeah, some of you are laughing. You've seen it. And they come out of the airport. To Moscow, and all they see is bears everywhere on unicycles riding round. And the guards stop them and say, "You're not Russian. You're not a bear." This is some of the funny sort of caricatures, stereotypes that there are. And I don't think they're so serious anymore. I would say most they realise the Cold War's over, and they now have a lot warmer impression of Russians. And it's funny. A lot of them still say, when I come home, they say, "How are you, comrades? How have you been?" And some of them forget, and they still think it's communist, which is a bit sad. But some of the older people maybe they forget a bit. And but generally, I'd say it's a good impression, and they're generally just fascinated. I would say there is ignorance about Russia in England, which is really the only country I can talk about safely. I mean, I think there is in America and Europe as well a bit, but I wouldn't say it's a bad ignorance anymore. It's really just a lack of knowledge. So, for example, some of them still think it's communist and it's always cold and there's bears on the streets. The other thing I noticed was that when you ask people if they want to come visit you, or if they ask how was your flight home, I ask them, how long a flight do you think it is to Moscow? When they say, to London, they say, 8 or 9 hours maybe. And they think it's a lot further away than you imagine. I said, no, it's only 3 or 4 hours. Really? It's only 3 or 4 hours. That's a lot closer than I thought. So they maybe have an idea that it's like Narnia or somewhere, that it's like some mysterious land beyond Europe. But you might get there if you say the right magic words and things. But, which is also interesting. But generally, I'd say there's a lot of stereotypes. English people love stereotypes. The Germans have no sense of humour. The French call themselves the best lovers, but they all have hairy armpits. So any country, the English have a stereotype. But the Russians, apart from the bears thing, the English say, the Russians, it's really just mystery. it's the word that they always think is mystery. They never really know. It's sort of like, I mean, is Russia really real? Is it a real place? It's funny to listen to think like that. So there's that. However, recently I did have a friend that came and visited. He was someone he's a farmer from back home in England. He's a very interested guy, but he didn't go to university. So he's someone who, if there were going to be stereotypes, he would have the stereotypes. But when he landed, he absolutely loved Moscow. He just said it just opened his eyes. And the thing that he loved the most, and one of the places I find most moving and most interesting in Moscow is Park Pobyeды. And when you go to the big monument, and we went to the Hall of Memory and Loss, and we just saw much, and most of the places I know in Russia, most of the place names I know are from battles that I've studied. So I know the geography of war in Russia. And I was trying to explain to him the sacrifices that Russians have been through in the war. And he just said, I didn't know any of this. I just didn't know it. And I said, he's gone back now, and he said, I'm going to tell everyone what it's like. And it's very moving to see the sacrifice and the loss that there was from Russia in the war. So that was what I'd say about English impressions of Russia. So now we'll go the other way around, and maybe you'll be able to tell me some more, but this is what I've picked up from the Russians, and this makes me laugh. Russian impressions of the English. And first of all, so many Russians have told me there is a section in textbooks for school children, English humour. And basically, one Russian told me this, one of my work friends told me this, that they were sat there in class, and the teacher said, okay, now we're going to learn about English jokes and English humour and how English humour works. And because the English love jokes, they're always telling jokes. So the teachers told the whole joke, got to the end and said, and that's the punchline. And all the kids just went, what? I don't understand. and then so all they get really is that English humour is weird. English humour is weird and very strange, and nobody understands it. Which, okay, some English humour is very weird, but I hope that some of the jokes that get across, and that maybe you can understand some of them. But I can see that. I found it very funny to think that English humour doesn't really work for all other cultures. That's one thing. The other thing is that English people eat porridge all the time. Every Russian I've spoken to, oh yeah. So did you have porridge for breakfast today? Well, I have porridge sometimes, but not every day. So that's another thing. That what is it? Ashanka, is it? No, not Ashanka. Ashanka, yeah. An Englishman asks. Ashanka's a hat, isn't it? Sorry. Yeah. Another thing, which is okay, yes, mostly Scotsmen. Scotsmen eat a lot of porridge, but Englishmen not so much. But if you want to believe that, then it's fine. It's okay. Another thing is that apparently there's a phrase that I heard that is an English way to make an exit. Is that an Englishman never says goodbye. An Englishman just walks out. Really? I'll just go now. Yeah. Which is another thing. Which is, I suppose. I do know now. I think about it. When you live in a culture, you don't see it from the outside. But when you talk to